Hello, Western Civ 105. Welcome to week 3, and we are moving along at a fast pace. When I'm looking at your papers, your discussions, and your notes, and I'm seeing that most of you right now are really engaged with the material. You are being exposed to a lot of information, but I'm happy to see that some of it is sticking out more to you than others, and you're learning. And so this week, I know it's a bit of a challenge. We have an exam. Now, I don't have a discussion for this week, but I do have the exam. Now, you'll notice that it's not multiple choice. So you're not going to have to stay up all night cramming information to memorize that you're going to forget later. It's basically the same type of situation as the Sunday paper, although on the Sunday papers, I'm a little more relaxed and informal. I'd like you to try to approach this a little bit more academic in your style of writing. And it goes for the same thing as that I do on Sunday papers. This is not a research paper. Use the information that we have, that you've covered in class. Which leads me to need to talk about something that I'm having a problem in both of my classes. Unfortunately, more than I have had in the past, is a lot of plagiarism is occurring. The plagiarism is when you cut and paste information from a source and you try to pass it off that you wrote it. There can be other forms of it, but I think that most of you at this point know what plagiarism is. What it comes down to is that you're good students, you're hard workers, but you're working too hard and you're trying to cut corners. And this isn't going to work, okay? It's the most ridiculous thing you can do for yourself, and you can ruin your academic life, okay? The technology is out there now. We have Turnitin. And which leads me to point out something. When you turn in your paper, and if you see that it says that 20% or 18% of your paper is flagged, don't panic. And don't panic, especially if you didn't plagiarize. It causes me to research what's going on. There are many sentences and phrases that can look similar that are on the internet, and Turnitin kind of, just makes me aware of that. So when I look into it, then I can say, okay, this isn't anything to worry about. But I'm seeing papers that are cut and pasted. I've literally had 3 students cut and paste the same information about Ivan the Terrible from the same paper that's on the internet. It's mind-blowing, okay? And I don't want to focus on the negative. I just want to say this. Those of you who've plagiarized are going to have to deal with talking to me, and some of you already have, and we're moving on, okay? If I get any more of this, I'm just sending this straight to the dean. I'm not having any patience with this at this point. I don't know. It's, okay? Stop. I do my best to work with all of you. So if you're having struggles, you just contact me. I have your back. And for those of you who I did catch plagiarizing, you know what? We're moving on. We're moving forward. I got myself into little jams when I was going to school. I'm not a hypocrite, and I'm empathetic. We all have to learn from life and certain mistakes or problems we have. But I need to make sure that you guys are not going to do something that's going to permanently ruin your academic future. So okay, all right. So I'll work with you. You work with me. Stick to the material, okay? And we'll get through this. This isn't as hard as this is. We're almost done. Now, moving forward from that, and on the positive, again, I have all of your backs. I'm not going to be focusing on anything negative moving forward. We're doing this definition paper, which is really going to be helpful, especially with the election cycle coming up. And you're going to see what a train wreck the people not having a knowledge about all these terms can be when they're talking politics. Now, you're going to notice a word that's not in the definitions section that it gets used a lot now is fascism. And the reason is because fascism doesn't yet come up on this time at this time period. So I will cover that more later. That's at the World War II era. Okay, that's Mussolini and Hitler, and it's a very specific type of right-wing nationalist ideology that is being falsely labeled a left-wing socialist ideology. And there's a very good reason for this misunderstanding in the United States, because it only occurs in the United States or places outside of Europe. When you're in Europe, nobody's confused by the origins of this model. But here's something else I wanted to say too. I'm not trying to promote or demote any of these models. What I want you all to do is use them correctly. And also be aware that over time, the meanings do change. So we can't be so much of a purist in terms of like, okay, well, the definition in the dictionary or historically it was this. But it does change. You know, the term social democrat in a certain time period and democratic socialist did mean a communist at a certain time in history, and now it does not. Okay? Now it does not. That's confusing. I talked about the term liberal and liberalism, how in the classical sense it's different than used today. I have to clarify this point. I just spent 3 months in Europe recently, and as I've been traveling, I realized that Europeans and even Australia use the term liberal and liberalism much more closer to the classical sense, which you're going to be learning. Okay, so in Australia, when I was in Cambodia, I was watching the news, and I only watched Australian news because that was the only English news that I could watch. Well, it wasn't the only one, but it was the best one. And the Liberal Party just came to power, and that was the shock and surprise in Australia. The Liberal Party sounds, in terms of their platform, very similar to Republicans in the United States, and very much not Democrats, the Democratic Party in the United States. But it's called the Liberal Party. But they're not liberals in terms of the way that the U.S. uses things. I mean, in the U.S., look, the rest of the world, it's called football. But in America, we call it soccer. And we call what the world calls, the world uses soccer as football, but we have our own football, which is not similar to anybody else's sport in the world. So we shouldn't be surprised that we use terms in a way that's a little bit different than many other people do. So I want you to keep that in mind. And so I'm also going to be posting throughout this week little documentary clips on some of the terms used that are optional. You don't have to watch them. I figure you're watching enough. But if you want some help with them, and when I post them, you can use those still for your notes if you want, or for the paper, as long as you just work, again, with things that I send your way, okay? Because there's a lot of misinformation on the internet, so I'd like you to follow my lead. And if you have a question with something, if you have a problem with it, then please let me know. So that's all I have to say on this. I hope you're having a great week. We'll be in touch. I know you're working hard. Keep working hard, and we're almost done. And talk to you later.